We have been working with SMEs for a number of years now and really looking to understand some of the challenges that SMEs face. They have a huge opportunity to make a real difference in reducing carbon emissions. SMEs account for nearly 30% of carbon emissions in the UK, and this is fairly typical with what we see in other markets too. And actually, the projections show that 50% of the UK's carbon reductions could be delivered by SMEs if they took action. But the challenge is only 1 in 10 SMEs have actually measured their carbon footprint because of some of the challenges around the complexity of understanding them. For many, understanding their impact on people and planet isn't necessarily their core business. And we know that some of the terms that comes up when you talk about carbon emissions, like scope 1, 2, and 3, gets very quickly very complicated. So there's a real challenge to help SMEs really get a good understanding of their impact and make it very simple and usable. We've done a great deal of research with SMEs, and there are 3 areas that come up. One is knowledge. It's really complicated. Carbon literacy is not high. There's a lot of confusion around the terminology. There's a lot of skepticism about solutions when we start talking about offsetting. I hear people almost scared of actually taking action because they don't quite know what the right thing to do is. The second one is all around time and resource. SMEs are struggling just to grow their business. And so they don't necessarily have the time and the resource to sit and think through and understand what their impact is. There are other priorities and other time constraints. They just don't have the capacity. And finally, it's access to financing. So there's a real lack of awareness and kind of access to capital. And it's interesting because there is so much out there if you look, but it gets very complicated. It's almost there's too much information. And what they need is really clear signaling. The kind of overriding problem with SMEs is they're not one homogenous group. A hairdresser is very different from a taxi driver to a hotel to a manufacturer. And within that, they all have their very nuanced needs. So the first thing is all about helping measure their impact. And then secondly, it's all about reducing their impact relative to the industry they work in. And what Cogo is doing is looking at spending information and transactional information and looking at how we can help, again, apply emissions factor data around where those SMEs are spending to help them get a really quick snapshot understanding of their carbon footprint. And again, then giving them some recommendations, very simple recommendations of how they can actually make better decisions around reducing their carbon emissions. But also importantly in today's day and age is also helping think around how they can save in terms of cost savings. So what is better for the planet, but also better for their pockets to help these SMEs transition to a low carbon economy. So even though the emission factor data isn't perfect, not every business has been able to disclose all of their carbon emissions. The data is good enough to help consumers and SMEs make a decision and make changes. We say there's enough precision to make a decision. And what we're seeing is that as more businesses are looking at their supply chains and understand their own carbon footprint, the data will continue to get better and better and more accurate. So this understanding of carbon footprints will only improve over time.